John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I start by congratulating my right honourable friend, the member for Chingford, on obtaining this debate, and also recognising the tremendous amount of work that he has done in this area. It's also a pleasure to follow the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, which I have been delighted to join as a new member in the last few weeks, and I'm pleased to be able to say that I thought she made an excellent contribution, and I agreed with every single word. I'd also join her in recognising the amount of work that was done by the previous committee in the last Parliament under the chairmanship of my right friend, the member for Rutland and Stamford, who continues to chair the APPG in this area and take a very strong interest. And they produced an extremely good report on this issue, which I have to say the government response was a little bit disappointing, and so it's right that we continue to press these matters today. I also chair the all-party parliamentary group on media freedom, which also is under huge pressure across the globe, with far too many journalists having died in pursuit of their profession or now currently in prison. The latest report shows that 546 journalists and media workers are detained as of today. The UK rightly has championed the cause of media freedom with a special unit in the Foreign Office, and we do need to go on making that case, but it is therefore a double matter of concern that some of those journalists who are imprisoned are also British. My right friend has mentioned a few cases. I want to do the same. He and I were both privileged to attend the Magnitsky Awards dinner a couple of weeks ago, where Bill Browder, now Sir William Browder, has done a huge amount, initially in support of prisoners in Russia and to bring sanctions against those responsible for the death of Sergei Magnitsky, but he's widened his campaign now to highlight cases of detained political prisoners around the world. The first one I wanted to mention, and on this I'm able to congratulate the government for the part they played. It was a privilege at the dinner to meet Vladimir Kara-Murza. I raised his case in this House, as have many other people, over the last few years, and we were seriously worried, particularly after the death of Alexei Navalny, that Kara-Murza would be next. And there was certainly evidence to suggest that he would have died if he had remained in prison. And I know that the British government, along with the American government and others, did a lot to obtain the release through prisoner swap, which took place a few months ago. I have some concerns about the concept of prisoner swap. There is always a risk that if you carry out a prisoner swap to obtain the release of innocent people in returning for sending back people who are certainly not innocent, which is what happened in this case, you simply encourage detaining of other innocents in the future. But in Kara-Murza's case, I think if he hadn't been released, he would have died. And obviously Evan Gershkovich, who also was released at that time, an American journalist, was another strong priority. So it is welcome that here is a case where we actually have obtained the release of a British national. But sadly, there are a number of others who are still in prison. My right friend has mentioned some. I obviously want to start, as he did, with the case of Jimmy Lai, a remarkably brave man who is now detained under the draconian national security law that has been introduced in Hong Kong. It is noticeable that Hong Kong, just 2 decades ago, was 18th in the world rankings of press freedom. It is now 135th. Jimmy Lai, as a publisher, he worked to uphold freedom of speech, and he was imprisoned as a result, and his health is under severe pressure, having been 4 years in solitary confinement. I know the Foreign Secretary met his son Sebastian, and we will continue to raise his case here until he is released. There's also been reference to Alaa Abdel Fattah. I, like a number of members, was able to speak to his mother, Leila Souf, very recently. She is on a hunger strike to obtain his release, but he has been convicted of spreading false news He has been a long-standing target of the regime. And it is noticeable that the Foreign Secretary, when in opposition, was very vocal in condemning the Egyptian government on his case, and actually called on the government to deny access to Whitehall to the Egyptian ambassador until he was released. I haven't noticed the Egyptian ambassador being denied access, and Abdel Fattah is still in prison. So I would ask the Foreign Secretary to reflect on what he said in opposition and strengthen the protests that we are making. The third case I wanted to mention is a British journalist who is not in prison, but Claire Rucastle-Brown, an independent journalist, has been the target of abusive lawsuits in Malaysia after she exposed corruption there. This year, she was sentenced in absentia to 2 years in prison on a bogus defamation charge, and she had not even been told that she'd been put on trial. Now, obviously, she is anxious to appeal, but she's been told that if she is to appeal, then she has to attend the court in Malaysia in person. And very understandably, she is extremely reluctant to do so, given the amount of personal risk. The government, as far as I'm aware, have not commented on her case, and she certainly has struggled to get support from the Foreign Office. So I would ask the Minister specifically to look into her case too. There is also the case of Gubad Ibadoglu, an Azeri activist, but one who was a senior advisor in the LSE. He returned to visit his family in Azerbaijan in 2023, and he was promptly arrested and locked up, and his family were quite badly assaulted during the course of his arrest. And my old friend and I and any others at the dinner a couple of weeks will have heard his daughter speaking about that and about her fears for his health. He is also somebody who is seriously ill and needs assistance.
With my right honourable friend on that point, it's also worth mentioning that Dr. Ibagolu's son visited Parliament a few weeks ago, and we had an opportunity to discuss his case there. And he has a close association with part of the University of London, and he was given assurances that it would be safe for him to return to visit his ailing mother. And subsequent to his arrest, a PhD student whose name is Fazil Gazimov has been extradited from Turkey, tortured into giving evidence against him, and has felt it necessary to go on hunger strike. So there seems to be a huge effort by the Azeri government to persecute people, even at a time that a COP meeting was scheduled to take place in their capital.
I'm extremely grateful to my right friend. He goes on to make the point which I was just coming to, which is actually, as the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee pointed out, that all too often one part of government may be campaigning or pressing for somebody's release, but at the same time other parts of government seem to be having a normal relationship with the government responsible and doing little. And the fact that we managed to send, I can't remember how many delegates to COP29, but it was certainly in 3 figures, and yet I would be interested to know how many of them actually raised with the government in Baku the case of Dr. Ibadoglu.
Briefly, actually, I and a number wrote to the Prime Minister before he departed for Baku, urged him to raise the case. But I understand subsequently the Foreign Office say he didn't raise the case with his hosts.
Well, I'm very disappointed to hear from my old friend, but sadly not surprised. I think I added my name to the letter that he sent. And yes, I'm looking my...
In fairness to the government, I have reason to believe that one of the other Foreign Office ministers was very concerned about it, and I think there's a high probability that the case may have been quietly raised, if not publicly raised.
Well, I'm grateful to my old friend for that. And well, no, let's not argue about whether or not it was raised. Let's agree that what we should do is continue to raise it in the future with the government of Azerbaijan until Dr. Ibadoglu is released. And the final case I just must mention, because it was raised quite rightly by the honourable gentleman, the member for Wirral West, is that of Emily Damari, one of the hostages being held in Gaza, who is a British citizen. She's 28, has been held for 425 days. Her mother is obviously deeply anxious simply to know that she is still alive, and therefore the government must do everything possible to continue to try and obtain her release. There will be other cases. I know that other members intend to raise other cases, and it's sad that so many British citizens are detained arbitrarily under trumped-up charges around the world, and that this debate is so vitally necessary. I want to just finish by endorsing some of the recommendations made by the Committee, Foreign Affairs Committee in the last Parliament and echoed by the current chair. I think a legal right to consular access is very important. It is something that the party opposite said they would bring in. We did raise it with the Foreign Secretary the other day. I would be grateful if the Minister could confirm that it is still the intention to introduce that. And I also agree with my honourable friends and the chair of the committee that the establishment of a separate director for arbitrary and complex detentions within the FCDO would be a really valuable addition. There is a confusion at the moment. All too often we're told the cases are being pursued but nothing happens, and with the single exception, as I mentioned, of Vladimir Kara-Murza, unfortunately all too many of those cases are of British nationals who continue to be unfairly and unjustly imprisoned, sometimes at risk of their life. So I look forward to the Minister's response on these points.